So we are now just more than halfway through season 1. We have 3 episodes left minus the Christmas special, and we finally got to see Dot and Bubble. The synopsis reads, "The world of Fine Time seems happy and harmonious, but an awful terror is preying on the citizens. Can the Doctor and Ruby make them see the truth before it's too late?" This sounds nowhere near as intriguing as 73 Years did, but is it still a good episode? I just want to start this video off with a massive thank you to my subscribers. You guys have allowed me to hit the goal of 500 subscribers, and that is absolutely fantastic. May we continue to grow and allow me to create more and more awesome content for you. So RTD has mentioned that he came up with the concept for this story 10 or so years ago, first pitching it to Stephen Moffat and Karen Gillan in LA at a dinner table. They both agreed back then that the episode would be far too complicated to make due to budgetary reasons, etc., so it was shelved. Until now. We start the episode off with the brilliant cold opening, drawn us in as Lindy wakes up to start her day in Fine Time, opening her hand to reveal a dot, and then we get to see this amazing shot of her laying in bed surrounded by her bubble. Inside the bubble we get to see all of her friends popping up to say good morning and have a chat. I fully get this is Fine Time, and everything is supposed to be fine all the time, but you really wouldn't see me getting up looking that flawless and happy in the morning. You can trust me on this. Lindy gets up and we're introduced to the arrow system that guides her to the bathroom. This immediately shows us that these bubbles are intended to continuously be up during her day. I really liked the slight dig at the popularity contest within this scene, as our friends continue to pop up on the screen, all having different numbers of subscriber count. And then we see Ricky September, who has everyone in Fine Time subscribed to him. It didn't take me long to figure out that this was all a hint and a nudge to physically showing us how everyone is walking around in their own little bubble. I really like how they've taken a saying that we use today and really made it a reality. This could be what walking around in our own bubbles could actually mean someday, if we don't learn to stop relying on technology. Before the title sequence rolled out, we got a nice pop-up from the Doctor who is trying to warn Lindy that there is danger and that she should listen to him, just for her to yeet him off her bubble. I found this funny because we all know how the Doctor hates it when someone doesn't listen, but this literally takes that to a whole new level. After the very much missed intro sequence from last week, we get a nice overview of Fine Time from the outside of their huge bubble. Now I don't know if it was just me, but I couldn't stop thinking about the Simpsons movie. The resemblance is just uncanny. However, this shot was just beautifully done, and I really think it helps to enhance the story by showing us just how in their own bubbles these people are. We then get our first scene from Ruby, who seems to be able to create more of a connection with Lindy, and this gets her to listen. During this trust building sequence, Ruby eventually gets Lindy to lower her bubble, and this is clearly something that none of the Fine Timeians do. So this proves to be a difficult challenge for her. So instead of getting Lindy to lower her bubble, she gets her to look past the bubble. Lindy having some spoiled kid attitude here. This is when we get to have a look at these things, the slug things. And I've got to say I was nervous for these monsters because on the shooting photos and on location shoot spoilers that I got to see, these things just didn't look great. They looked very classic Doctor Who monster and I was worried it wasn't going to work, but damn, they turned them out. They turned them out. Callie Cook's performance throughout this whole episode is just fantastic. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been acting out all those scenes on her own with no visual cues or anything to go with. Most of this episode is just her in the bubble, and then being able to act like that and do it convincingly is a really hard challenge. Never mind having to have a bad attitude and be dramatic on top of all of that. But she did it, and she did it really well. Casting for this character was definitely the right choice. In fact, I would say casting for all the characters in this episode was just perfect. So we get to the point where Lindy has been asked to lower her bubble and try and leave her workspace to avoid being eaten by the slug things. Lindy discovers that she can't walk without the arrows. The fact that she can't do this is just a further way of showing us how much these Fine Timeians live in their own little bubble within a bigger bubble, never being able to walk without the assistance of the arrows. Personally, this part made no sense to me whatsoever because if she can walk, then she should have been able to walk regardless. But I do get what it was trying to portray. Really, all of this is just a plot device for later on in the story, so we have a reason for the secondary character to be introduced. So eventually, Lindy freaks out, puts her bubble back up, and uses it to get out of the workspace, getting to the lift and nearly getting swallowed up by the big slug things. But it just avoids her and leaves her alone. The Doctor points this out, and it leaves us thinking on why it's not wanting to eat Lindy. I actually thought this was because of her bad attitude. She might not have tasted so good, but we'll talk about this in a bit. As we get outside and get our first proper look at ᴍᴏ, we get to experience a buffet of ᴍᴏians getting munched on by lots of these slug things. It is literally just a massacre and none of them even know they are just happily walking right into these things and being eaten. Again, a subtle hint to our current society on how we rely on technology too much and basically walk about with our eyes closed. The Doctor then goes on to mention how tight the security was and how he couldn't even get into ᴍᴏ. This allows us to know that if the Tardis can't get through, then how on earth did these slug things get in? But then Ruby comes in with the real good questions. What even is ᴍᴏ? Lindy goes on to explain that ᴍᴏ is a place for the young rich kids to go and work for 2 long hours a day. I like this hint and nudge from RTD, I really like it, 2 long hours a day. Telling us that our mummy paid for it all. And then we have our Susan Twist appearance for this episode. It's really nice to see how talented this woman is. She has taken every small part in this series and seriously made it into a special moment. And after watching this episode, I have another small theory on who Susan Twist could be. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The most important part of this is how the Doctor and Ruby notice her. The Doctor says she was the ambulance, and Ruby then says no, I've seen her another time. Ruby can remember shreds of her erased timeline from 73 yards. This is really interesting. The Doctor then saves an image of her for later. He's starting to notice her. I'm a little bit disappointed with this though, as being 5 episodes in, I was hoping the Doctor would have had a chance to at least speak with Susan Twist's character, similar to how Ruby did in 73 yards. So it was just a little bit like, oop, there she is again. Only this time he recognises her. Considering she is apparently only going to be a portrait and rogue, we aren't going to be able to get to see them interact until the last 2 episodes. Or at least not until Empire of Death. So yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with this. Lindy does the heroic thing and tries to warn her friends only for them to all think that she's talking crazy. All apart from Gothic Paul, who has been trying to tell her that people have been going missing since, well, the beginning of the episode. Gothic Paul is then munched on screen like he's a Big Mac from McDonald's, leaving everyone with no choice but to believe Lindy. And for Lindy, of course, to turn to the Doctor. I'm loving the Doctor's slightly bitchy attitude towards Lindy, with the unblocked babes and the unmuted honey. It just fits so well with this Doctor and this specific setting as well. So to make matters worse, as if it wasn't bad enough that our friend had just been eaten right in front of her, Lindy's dot starts to run low on battery. Nice line from Ruby. You still have battery issues? Found that one funny as well. This leaves Lindy without any guidance of the arrows as she tries to find her own way to the conduits to make her escape to safety from ᴍᴏ. On her conquest through ᴍᴏ, to get to her safe zone, she is faced with 4 big slug things, all just sitting waiting for their next meal. Lindy has no choice but to walk through these, again, remembering she has no bubble, and this is where the plot point from earlier comes in. Lindy struggles to walk in a straight line and nearly ends up in one of the slug's mouths, until we have the heroic saviour Ricky September show up. He guides Lindy on her path to him, and they end up in an accidental cuddle. Cute but unnecessary to the plot. We find out that Ricky only does what he needs to do on his dot and bubble and then switches it off for the day and does things like reading and adventuring, showing us that he is an outlier in the community and doesn't think they should all be on technology all the time. They eventually come across a place to charge up and Ricky attempts to contact the home world, only to find out that it's been consumed by these slug things, and there is 0 left in the population. The Doctor finally figures it out after telling Ricky that he has a 100 number combination to type into the security pad to get the door open. The slugs are eating people in alphabetical order. We find out that this would mean that Lindy is next, and the tension rises within the bunker they're in, as she starts to get dramatic and freaks that they're coming to get her. But then we discover that the dot is actually what's created the slug things, and it's the technology inside the dot that's grown to hate the ᴍᴏians, meaning tension rises again as Lindy's dot literally sees red and starts to attack her. Ricky, being the hero of this episode, tells Lindy to take over the number pad as he fights it off. Finally, eventually, the door opens and Lindy just straight up throws Ricky onto the bus and tells the dot that his last name is actually Coombs, and C comes before P, allowing her to essentially trade her life for his. I really knew I didn't like this character. Such a bitch move, man. I was a little confused by the ending. I fully understand that the Doctor was upset and angry they wouldn't let him save them, but what was the comment on "you're not one of us"? Was this supposed to be a racist remark, or was it a species remark? One of them even said something about the Doctor being contagious. I felt like there were some hints of racism through this episode, as all the ᴍᴏians appear to be white. at least what we got to see of them. The fact that Lindy was so rude towards the Doctor throughout, but just barely tolerated Ruby. Lindy even swiped the Doctor away and blocked him, but allowed Ruby to speak with her. If I'm missing something here, please comment and fill me in on what I've overlooked, but this is what I took away from the ending. But I still feel a little bit confused. Okay, past self, stop right there. Okay, I watched Unleashed and realised very quickly that the thoughts on racism that I was seeing and thinking about throughout the episode was actually the intention. And my thoughts were correct, making this ending to this episode so powerful. The heartbreak from the Doctor because they won't go with him simply because they do not see him as one of them. This breaks my heart. This was a very good thing to have front and centre to make people think, just like it made me think. It's got to be one of the best Doctor Who episode endings I've ever seen. But I just want to comment on the effects on the episode. They blew me away. The bubble just looked so good, and the way in which they interacted with the user was just fantastic. The slugs, as I mentioned earlier, also turned out way better than expected, and they really did just make them come to life with the additional CG elements. Fine Time overall looked amazing throughout the episode, although most of this was probably sets and location shoots as well. The Doctor also looked amazing at the end of this episode. I really enjoyed this debut outfit, and I kind of want it to stay, but we know it's not going to. Sadly, really, it's such a nice outfit that we only get to see for, 6 minutes or so. Everyone's acting was on point. There was no one who really took me out of the story in any way. But the Doctor and Ruby, for as much as we see them in this episode, they really used what time they had to leave an impact. And to be honest, I really didn't feel like they weren't in the episode. I am, however, really starting to feel like we need longer episodes. These stories that are being told are very big stories to fill a 45-minute episode. This episode could have also benefited from being an hour long, just like 73 Yards. This lets us get in and get a bit more of Fine Time without diving into the drama. This would probably help us build more connections with the characters that died as well. Okay, I did say I had a little theory on who Susan Twist potentially could be, so here's my little theory that I mentioned at the beginning of this video in regards to Susan Twist's characters. What if it is actually Lindy when she's older? She would most likely have access to some form of time travel by the time she turns 60 odd. And she seemed to really hate the Doctor, especially that look she gives when she sails down the river as if she's in a casting of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, she really just seemed to dislike the Doctor throughout this full episode. Just some food for thought. Again, it's a theory, I could be wrong, but who else to better be Susan Twist's character than someone that's supposed to grow up to look like her mother anyway? I'm going to rate this episode an 8 out of 10. Yeah, we'll revisit that on this season review. Anyway, that's all I have to say on this episode. If you want to stay in the YouTube Whoniverse, you can always do so by clicking this video here, and don't forget to click like and subscribe.